Good evening, Dr. Dexter and classmates. My report today is about Edmund Husserl. Edmund Husserl is a German philosopher born in Prossnitz, Moravia, Austrian Empire, known today as Czech Republic, on April 8, 1859 and died on April 27, 1938. He had 3 children and his parents were non-Orthodox Jews. For his work, he is apparently known as the principal founder of phenomenology, and thus one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. He has made important contributions to almost all areas of philosophy and anticipated central ideas of its neighboring disciplines such as linguistics, sociology, and cognitive psychology. He studied astronomy in Leipzig, where he also attended courses of lectures in mathematics, physics, and philosophy. Among other things, he also heard lectures on Wilhelm Wundt on philosophy, who was the originator of the first Institute for Experimental Psychology, and Thomas Masaryk as his mentor, who later became the first president of Czechoslovakia. Intensively in 1878–1881, Husserl continued his studies in mathematics, physics, and philosophy in Berlin. He took his PhD in mathematics in Vienna on January 9, 1883, with a thesis on the theory of variations. After a brief military service in Vienna, he followed Masaryk's advice and studied with Brentano from 1884 to 1886. Brentano's lectures on psychology and logic had a lasting impact on Husserl, as he had his general vision of a strictly scientific philosophy. Brentano then recommended Husserl to his pupil Karl Stumpf, who is perhaps best known for his psychology of tone. This recommendation enabled Husserl to prepare and submit his habilitation dissertation on the concept of numbers in 1887 with Stumpf. In his work, Philosophy of Arithmetic, Husserl combined his mathematical, psychological, and philosophical competencies to attempt a psychological foundation of arithmetic. The book was, however, criticized for its underlying psychologism. It seems that Husserl took that criticism very seriously, although it is far from clear that the author of Philosophy of Arithmetic regards logic as a branch of psychology as strong psychologism has it. In any case, Husserl sharply attacked that kind of psychologism, raising about 18 objections in total, and developed the philosophical method he is nowadays famous for, the phenomenology. His phenomenological work was published in 2 volumes, entitled Logical Investigations. The first volume contains a forceful attack against psychologism, whereas the much larger second volume consists of 6 descriptive psychological and epistemological investigations such as expression and meaning, universals, the formal ontology of parts and wholes or the mereology, fourth, the syntactical and mereological structure of meaning, the nature and structure of intentionality, as well as the interrelation of truth, intuition, and cognition. He now adheres to a version of Platonism about the meaning and mental content in a theory of international consciousness. In the first decade of the 20th century, Husserl considerably refined and modified his method into what he called Continental phenomenology. This method has focused on the essential structures that allow the objects naively taken for granted in the natural attitude which is a characteristic of both our everyday life and ordinary science to constitute themselves in consciousness. As Husserl explains in detail in his second major work, Ideas, 1913, the resulting perspective on the realm of intentional consciousness is supposed to enable the phenomenologist to develop a radically unprejudiced justification of his or her basic views on the world and himself and explore the rational interconnection. Husserl developed these ideas in Continental. He received an associate professorship extraordinariate, later turned into a personalities ordinariate. He stayed in Göttingen until 1916. It is here that he made his most important philosophical discoveries such as the transcendental phenomenological method, the phenomenological structure of time consciousness, the fundamental role of the notion of intersubjectivity in our conceptual system, the reason structure of our singular empirical thought, and more. In these later, most notably works, and the results had developed further and put into new contexts, such as the path-breaking project of linking the basic notions of science back to their conceptual roots in the pre-scientific regions of the life-world crisis. After the publication of the Logics Unter Sojourn, Husserl was called at the instigation of David Hilbert, a formalist mathematician, to the position of Außerordentlicher Lecture Professor or the University Lecturer by the University of Göttingen. His time of teaching in Göttingen from 1901 to 1916 was important as the source of the phenomenological movement and marked the formation of a school reaching out to many lands and branching out in numerous directions. In the Göttingen years, Husserl drafted the outline of phenomenology as a universal philosophical science. Its fundamental methodological principle was what Husserl called the phenomenological reduction. It focuses on the philosophical attention on uninterpreted basic experience and the quest, thereby for the essences of things. In this sense, it is eidetic reduction. On the other hand, it is also the reflection on the function by which essences become conscious. As such, the reduction reveals one ego for which everything has meaning. Hence, phenomenology took on the character of a new style of transcendental philosophy which repeats and improves Kant's mediation between empirism and rationalism in a modern way. That ends my report. Thank you, Doc Dexter and classmates.